You ever use a system that just gets you? Like, where everything actually makes sense and works like it's supposed to? That's the vibe with Empower EMR from MW Therapy. It's built specifically for physical therapists, so you're not stuck Frankensteining a bunch of software that was designed for other industries together. Empower is your one-stop shop from scheduling and billing to reporting and even built-in marketing. The real magic? The automation. This thing works with you, filling your schedule, reminding patients, and keeping everything moving behind the scenes. Clinics are raving about how fast the switch was and how much time they're saving. If you're tired of fighting your EMR and ready to work with a system that lifts you up instead of dragging you down, head to mwtherapy.com and schedule a demo. Empower, the upgrade you didn't know you needed.
The next question is, can you have the down payment and can you afford the monthly payment? You might say, hey, that's a beautiful property. It's right where I want it to be. But again, if the cost of buying that is going to give you a monthly payment of $25,000 and you can rent for $6,000, you might say, look, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like, sure, I love to own my own building. I love principal pay down. I love depreciation. I love tax deductions that you get when you own, but it's not conducive to me being successful in my practice.
Here's the thing. Our guest today didn't set out to be the go-to expert for healthcare providers in real estate. But after 2 decades and over 1,000 or more deals later, he's become the first phone call for healthcare providers who are about to sign a lease or buy a building and don't want to have to leave hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. He's the guy who knows all the stuff that your landlord hopes you never find out. The loopholes in lease renewals, the negotiation tactics you didn't know you were allowed to use, the subtle ways your real estate choices can either crush your bottom line or create long-term freedom. He's built the country's leading healthcare tenant rep firm from the ground up. And he's on a mission to make sure practice owners stop treating real estate like an afterthought. So grab a drink, buckle in, and learn how to protect your practice like a pro. Welcome to the PT Pintcast. Again, Colin Carr. Last time we had you on the show, I remember like half the time, I remember my mind just spinning. I was like, this guy just focuses on real estate for healthcare. I'm like, healthcare providers. I'm like, this is where we are in the world, where it's like niches are this powerful thing. So you've got sort of like a courtside seat at a lot of things that could go right and wrong. So on more than 1,000 real estate deals across healthcare, I want to know what your biggest, if they only knew, mistake that a practice owner still makes when it comes to their space. Because this thing sticks around. When you sign that lease, it's good for that term.
Yeah. Yeah, you're locked and loaded. I think a lot of times people have this idea like, well, I'll just, I'll just do it again, or I got a mulligan, or I can change it. It's like, no, man, you're locking into typically a 10-year contract for a lease. If you're buying a building, you cannot come in and out of commercial real estate deals the same way you do residential. There's a lot more time and energy. So you want to make sure you do it right the first time. So yeah, if I could only give people one piece of advice, and certainly I can give a lot more, but if I could only give one, it would be you have to have a strategy and posture in every negotiation that you go into. So that's kind of like the high level statement. And then like the underlying statement there is, well, people say, well, how do I do that? The only way you can have a strategy or posture in a commercial real estate negotiation is you have to have multiple options.
Wow. That's it, right?
If you, and this is the number one error people make, is whether they're in a current building and their lease is coming up for renewal and they're like, well, I'll just negotiate with my current landlord, see what I can get. That's a fool's game plan to get completely crushed in a negotiation and lose hundreds of thousands. Or they just drive around and see a property for a new location. They call them, oh, this would be great. And so the problem with that is you have nothing to benchmark terms against. Like, all you can do is look at what they said in their first offer or where they started, which is never going to be like a meaningful place. Like, right. People, oh yeah, I got the landlord to come down, or I got him to go from this amount of concessions to this amount. And it's like, the landlord's smart enough to know that you think you getting a little bit of movement makes you feel good, but that deal could be terrible compared to what you could have received from 3 or 4 other landlords. So, in order to have posture and strategy in a commercial real estate negotiation, you've got to have multiple options. In order to have multiple options, you've got to know the market. You've got to take time to get in the market. You got to make sure that you can put one landlord up against another landlord, and you've got to go 2 or 3 or 4 rounds of negotiations, because landlords are not just going to give you their best terms. Like, they're not just going to say, "Oh, you submitted an offer. Here's my best deal,"
Right.
where I'm willing to give you an extra $300,000 over 10 years more than I would have just because you asked. Like, that's not how it works. So I would say that's my number one point. And I got to say one more thing that's tied to it is, hopefully this does not offend people, but it's a reality. There's not 1 out of 100 landlords that's going to assume that a healthcare provider knows what they're doing. And so if you're going into a commercial real estate transaction without representation, the landlord will be cordial to you. They'll be accommodating to you. They'll get you in the space, or the listing broker, whoever you're talking to. They'll send you information. They're not going to assume you know what you're doing. They're going to assume that you are a fool. Like, do you honestly think like that, like JP Chase Morgan Bank or Bank of America or Lockheed Martin or Chipotle or Starbucks, or whether it's office user or retail user, whether it's an industrial manufacturer, do you think they're just going to have some random person in the business whose expertise is clinical handling the real estate? Like,
no way.
When a doctor shows up, the landlord's literally thinking to themselves, "I'm going to take this guy for literally $300,000, $400,000 more than he would pay or she would pay if they had an agent." And unfortunately, it's just a really common mistake that doctors or healthcare providers make. It's, I'm intelligent. No one's doubting your intelligence when it comes to healthcare, but you're not a real estate expert. Like, it'd be no different than a patient being like, "Well, I can just do my own procedure." Like, I saw a video online, like, it's like, "Oh, dude, this guy went to school for like 6, 8, 10, 12 years. He's been practicing, or she's been practicing for X number of years since that time. It's their primary and only craft. Like, they know what they're doing. They spend 8, 10 hours a day doing it." You're not going to get the same result taking it for a drive once every 10 years. Right. It's the same thing for real estate.
I was going to say, my follow-up question was going to be, well, why would healthcare providers maybe not be equipped to this? Are we just bleeding hearts? But you answered it, which is like, it's not our bag. So you brought a knife to a gunfight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, the question of like, can you do it? Yes, like, you have the ability to do it. You can pick up a phone, you can call a landlord or listing agent, say, "Send me a brochure. Can we meet? Can I see the property? Send me a proposal." Like, you can do those things. But the landlord's going to look at the person showing up without representation. And again, I worked for landlords for almost 10 years before I started this company. I did a lot of landlord work, and when especially healthcare providers would show up without representation, the landlord's thought was like, literally, like, what an idiot, like, what a fool. Like, again, there's no possible way that Fortune 500 companies are just having some random guy or gal show up. So the landlords, when they'd see these doctors show up without representation, they would be like, "Let's make a deal." And they'd even say stuff like, "Hey man, like, I want to take care of you. You seem like a good guy," or, like, I like you. Like, they would say things like, I'd listen to the landlords or other listing brokers or property managers, like, make comments to doctors. And I'm just like, oh man, like, this is just such a bad, like subpar, like, high school drama that you're like, you're just watching this really bad performance. You're just like, and the doctors are just like, "Oh, this is great. No, he said he's going to take care of me," or "He says he really likes me, so he's going to give me a better deal," or "He said because I didn't have an agent that he'd give me a better deal. As opposed to paying an agent a commission, he'd give me a discount." Right. It's like, dude, it's not how it works, man.
Sounds like what you don't know can hurt you, and can hurt you bad, deep, and for a long time that you can't take a mulligan on.
No. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. And so then the next question is, people say, well, why wouldn't someone hire someone? There's a couple reasons why. Number one, a lot of times doctors, health providers, office administrators, they don't have a lot of time, and they're like, "I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. I'll just give it to me and I'll do it." And out of like desperation or frustration, or just timing. They're just like, I just have to do this. I don't have time. Like, let's figure it out. That's one reason. Another reason is they think about it, but they don't know who to call.
Right.
And maybe they get introduced to like a couple, commercial brokers that primarily represent landlords. They don't give them the time of day. They don't show them respect. A lot of landlord brokers don't like doing tenant and buyer rep for a lot of reasons. And so they talk to a broker or two and they're like, well, this guy doesn't seem like he's going to help me at all. And so there's same thing as well. I don't have anyone good. And then the third reason is they'll just say, I don't have the money, or I don't want to spend the money. And this is where, again, what you don't know hurts you at a high level. Commissions in commercial real estate are paid just like in residential real estate. They're paid by the landlord or the seller. Like if you're selling your house, it's incredibly rare to tell the buyer that they're going to pay their agent. Like it's just not the real estate industry. Sellers of houses set aside a commission amount that's negotiable with a percentage of the deal. And then they say, look, to the listing agent, you get half and then give the other half to the buyer's agent. If the buyer shows up without an agent, that listing agent gets a double commission.
Right.
So in the scenario of commercial real estate with healthcare, when a doctor shows up or a healthcare provider shows up and they don't have an agent, the listing agent gets a double commission, or the landlord just keeps that money. And so it's not a for sale by owner. Like if you're a doctor, healthcare provider, you're not the owner of the property deciding who gets paid what commission. And if you don't use an agent, you keep it. As a tenant or buyer, you're literally just telling the listing agent, hey, take my commission that would have gone to my agent. You get fat off that, and I'm going to get completely hosed because I don't have anyone to help me. And so it's a no-brainer. So when healthcare providers realize you're not saving money by not having an agent, the money is already set aside, and you're just basically forfeiting this benefit, then the light bulb comes on. They're like, okay, well, this is a no-brainer. But then the next question goes back to the other question of how do I find someone good? That's a whole nother situation. But once they realize they're not paying for it, it's not going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars. You can't afford it because it's not going to cost you anything directly. That changes the narrative. So then it becomes, how do I find good people then?
So I'm not letting you go until you tell me that. What does someone, how does someone find someone good?
So the criteria of what you're looking for determines the course of action. You're looking for someone who understands healthcare. So that's really important. Someone that does, industrial warehouse manufacturing deals, like sure, they can get a deal done, but you want someone who understands healthcare. That's number one. Number two, you want someone that does not have conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest is when someone's trying to represent two opposing parties.
Right.
And this is super obvious, again, when you hear it, but a lot of people don't think about this one. If somebody sued you, like you're not going to ask the attorney who is suing you to help you out of the situation. Like you've got to have your own representation. Same thing, like if you get a tax audit or the IRS says, what's going on here? You don't call the IRS guy and say, hey, give me some advice. Like you get your own CPA or attorney. You can't work for, or you can't have a listing agent that's working for a landlord also helping you. So you've got to have someone who's conflict free, who's doing tenant and buyer representation. They're not listing properties in the area, and they're also not going to use your deal as bait to get a relationship with the new landlord and just kind of glad hand the landlord, get your deal done. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, their signs in front of the building that you're leasing now, and they were formerly your agent. Now they're the landlord's agent. That happens all the time. Wow. So healthcare experience, tenant and buyer rep, expertise and focus, no conflicts of interest. So you can search that online. You can Google healthcare tenant and buyer rep. You can use terminology like that for whatever search engine you're using. But another great way to do it is you just talk to industry experts. Like you find lenders that specialize in healthcare. You find CPAs or attorneys or architects. And if you ask a few people, hey, who do you know that really specializes in healthcare tenant buyer rep for real estate, no conflicts of interest, you're going to probably hear similar names in a certain city or market that are prominent. And then that gives you a short list of people to start talking to, interviewing, and then trying to find someone that you like. But when all else fails, if you don't have those relationships, just get online, search it, start making some phone calls or emails. And, the direction is pretty simple. Just don't stop until you find someone you like. It's,
sure.
Talk to someone, you're like, I'm just not feeling this person. Even if they come highly referred, just go on to the next person. There is more than one fish in the sea, especially in this situation. And there's enough people out there that you should be able to find someone that you like, trust, want to work with, and that you actually believe is going to help you.
All right, you mentioned this word before, which is lease. You mentioned another word, which is buy. I'm feeling like there's a healthcare phrase going to come up with like it depends. But a lot of
Mhm.
people are thinking, should I lease or buy? I'm guessing there's a lot of depends. How should a practice owner really think through that big decision, especially maybe early in their growth as a practice owner?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of owning commercial real estate if it's a great location, a great building, and the numbers make sense. And so, it's kind of like leasing a house versus buying a house, or renting versus buying. If you can find a great house in an area that you want to be in, and the numbers make sense, like I think there's a lot of arguments why ownership, is better than renting. But it also depends on the season of your life, and it depends on a lot of factors. But here's some of the criteria I tell you. Number one, when you go into a market, let's say you said, "Hey, I want to be in this area, this sub market, within a 2-3 mile radius of this location, whatever it might be." There might not be any options to purchase in commercial real estate. Like in residential real estate, there's almost always another neighborhood or another building or a house to buy. In commercial real estate, like if you're in a certain area, you could run a search in a 2 mile radius and not find one property for sale. Like from a scarcity standpoint, there are a lot less commercial properties that are for sale than there are for lease. And then there's a lot less properties that are inside of a certain price range that work. Like, a 4-story office building that's 100,000 square feet is not going to be an option for most healthcare providers. They're not going to have $15 million. Like they're going to say, I have $1.5 million. So, the first question is, what's the inventory? What's the availability? The next question is, could you have the down payment and can you afford the monthly payment? You might say, hey, that's a beautiful property. It's right where I want it to be. But again, if the cost of buying that is going to give you a monthly payment of 25,000 and you can rent for 6,000, you might say, look, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Like, sure, I love to own my own building. I love principal pay down. I love depreciation. I love tax deductions that you get when you own, but it's not conducive to me being successful in my practice. Other times you find these buildings that the price works, the numbers work, et cetera, but it's not a good location. Like,
Right.
you got to turn right, turn left, turn right. And it's the third building behind the warehouse. And you're like, that's not going to help me because while the numbers make sense, patients are not going to like it. It's not going to help my referrals. Staff's not going to be as excited to show up to work here every day compared to the other options. So the simple game plan is this: if you're open to purchasing outside of leasing or additional leasing, go to the market, look at all your top options, narrow them down to the top 3 or 4 properties, negotiate simultaneously on 3 or 4 properties, whether it's for lease or for purchase, and then you compare the numbers and you say things like, what's the cost to get in the lease? What's the cost to get into the purchase? What does the monthly payment look like on a monthly cash flow basis? And then you factor in things like principal pay down. Every month you cut a check to a mortgage company or a bank or a lender, your net worth goes up because a portion pays down principal. What's the depreciation look like on the purchase of the real estate? Because you can depreciate the real estate and pick up a lot of times tens of thousands of dollars per year in extra tax deductions. And then what do the tax deductions look like in both in a lease and a purchase? How do they compare? That's called the purchase versus lease analysis. And once you get to the bottom of that equation, you'll see the effective cost of owning versus leasing. And then it'll be really clear, like either, yes, this makes sense to buy, or no, it's too expensive. But the numbers will basically tell you very quickly whether it's even an option or not. And sometimes you might have 3 or 4 options to purchase and you're in a really good place. Other times, like you might want to buy and you have nothing to purchase. It just doesn't make sense. So inventory will determine that for you a lot of times too.
All right, you didn't start your practice to become a full-time billing detective, right? So what if you could let Athellis RCM take that off your plate? It's AI-powered revenue cycle management that actually gets you paid faster, with fewer denials and way less stress. Athellis plugs into your EMR, no messy tech drama, and it starts working immediately. Denials managed, payments tracked, insights clear as day. You get a real-time dashboard that shows you where your money is, what's working, and where you can improve. If you're ready to stop chasing dollars and start collecting them, it's time to check out Athellis RCM. Go to Athellis.com and book that demo. That's ATHELAS.com. Your future self will thank you. Mark, a lot of good questions you should be asking. And one of them, I bet you would say, your biggest advantage is time. You mentioned earlier, these things sneak up. You're running a business. then a lease ending is coming up and you're like, I'll get to it until you're like, man, we got to solve this thing. So those
Yep.
things can sneak up quick. What's a piece of advice you wish every provider would follow 12 months, a year before that renewal date actually hits?
Well, you actually just hit it yourself. Is start the process at least 12 months in
Yeah.
advance. A lot of landlords are very savvy with this, and they will run the clock out.
Oh
And
man.
so, whether you're a sports guy or not, or you watch, like, you watch football, and the team who's on defense is down, and the team on offense is like, look, we're going to run the clock out. They're staying in bounds at all costs. They're going to run the ball, not pass it. They want that clock just to keep ticking down, because they know that if they can keep the defense from getting the ball, they're not going to have time to win. So a lot of landlords will wait till the tenant is like a month or two or three from their lease expiring, and then they'll realize that that tenant has no ability, within a reasonable time frame, to go find another location, get it built out, relocate. And so then they get stuck in this corner with, like, I guess I have no option besides to stay and take this deal. And then at that point, the landlord knows whatever that tenant asked for, they're literally begging. Like,
Right.
would you give me a better lease rate? No. Would you give me TI allowance to renovate? No. Can you give me some free rent? No. Eventually, they might give them some little, like, little carrot to get them just to do the deal and go away. But the landlord knows at that point that person doesn't have a viable opportunity to move in time. And so
Right.
the timing is really important. 10 to 12 months in advance. 10 months should be the minimum. 12 is ideal. 14, 15, 16, fantastic. You don't want to start at 3 years in advance, because there's no option for you to get out of your lease. So you're just wasting time, because what's available 3 years from your lease expiring is not going to be available 12 months. But 12 months gives you time to go to market, look at options, negotiate multiple properties, select the best option, decide to move forward. And then if you are relocating, it gives you the time to design it, get construction documents, get a permit, build it out, equip it, move in, work the kinks out, get the IT and all the wiring done, and then you open the door to see patients again. But if you don't have at least 10, 12 months, you can get it done, but you're going to be on a more rapid time frame than you'd like to be.
Yeah, want to buy some time. All right, so my rudimentary knowledge of real estate, right? The first three rules are location, 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 right? But in healthcare real estate, are there myths around things like visibility? You mentioned make a right, make a left, it's behind the warehouse, or square footage. Are there myths around those things that we take too much to heart and that hurts us? Things that maybe are repeated because they sound good that actually aren't true?
Yeah, no, I mean, location is exceptionally important. I mean, the quality of your location, the accessibility of it, if it has visibility, that's great. But you can find all those things and then not have parking. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I can give you an example. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and, like, we had this retail center where this healthcare provider went in, and then this brand new restaurant concept came in, which I said everyone would know what it is. And if you're there at 8 or 9 in the morning, no problem. But when it hits 11 o'clock, this restaurant literally, you cannot park. There's not a
Wow.
single parking space. And then if you get there around 4 or 5, it's the same thing. And so, it's a combination of the location. If you can get visibility, that's great. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes an office building makes more sense than retail. Parking obviously is a big factor. And then you have other concepts, though, like what's the lease rate? And then you've got to go deeper from there. How much money is the landlord giving you to build out the space?
Yeah.
Like, how much free rent are they giving you? Because you could have a scenario where one landlord's charging you a higher lease rate, but what if they gave you enough money to pay for your entire build out? And so, you look at it, one landlord's at $20 a square foot, one guy's at $25 a square foot, but the one at 25 a square foot is going to give you $75 a square foot to build out your space. If you run the math on not borrowing $75 a foot, paying 7 or 8% interest over 10 years, and then factor in free rent, you'd be better off to pay a higher lease rate, not borrow that money. And so, the economics always come into play no matter what you're doing. What's the total cost per month for my lease, and then any money I have to borrow to get the space built out. How do you factor in free rent? You get one landlord that gives you 4 or 5 months of free rent to start a new deal. I mean, that could shave off, $1, $2 or $3 a foot on the lease rate if you factored over, 5, 7, 10 years. So location's important. Visibility, signage, if you can get it, great. Sometimes office makes more sense. Sometimes the cost savings is worth not having a sign, especially if you got a really established practice with really good referral patterns. and then the economics. And again, that's why, like, somebody might hear this say, well, that's overwhelming. It's not overwhelming when you take it step by step
Sure.
and you have an advisor, but that's why you can't just pick a property and then hope it works. You've got to take property 1, 2, 3, and 4, go 3 or 4 rounds of negotiations. And then when you're looking at it, you can say, look, this property's going to cost me $1,000 a month more, but it's worth it to me because it's a way better location and the free rent's fantastic and I like this or that. Or you say, look, this is not worth paying an extra $2,000 a month. I'd rather go to the office space. I can use that money for targeted marketing. I don't even probably need that because my practice is thriving. And I'd rather save, 25, 30 grand a year in rents and either put it in my pocket or invest it somewhere else. And it's not worth getting a sign for 30,000 a year.
Yeah, a lot of factors. Compare apples to apples and make sure I mean, again, I think that time element you're saying is if you're rushed, you can't make those decisions properly because you're not able to invest the time while you're running your business. Colin, we're going to play a game called Deal or No Deal, Clinical Edition. Are you ready for this?
Let's do it.
All right, I hit the button twice. So I'm going to give you a scenario. You give me deal, which is like a green flag, or no deal, red flag. And then you can give a little one sentence or you can go deep into why.
Yeah.
First segment on Deal or No Deal, Clinical Edition with Colin Carr. My landlord says I don't need representation. They'll just handle everything for me. I mean, you already tipped your hand on this one.
No deal. No deal.
Yeah. I mean, that person is the person you're negotiating against. They're not going to negotiate in your best interest.
Yeah, the reciprocal statement to the landlord would be great. Then you don't go to the doctor or healthcare provider ever. You just do it yourself because that's what you're asking me to do. Right. And so, if a healthcare provider told a landlord never go to the doctor, you can just do it yourself. The landlord say that's foolish. I'm not a doctor. Then you'd say this is foolish too. I'm not a real estate specialist.
Yeah, my lease auto renews, Colin, and I forgot to negotiate it.
That's a bad place to be. A lot of leases do auto renew. And or you miss the option to renew and they kick you out or they charge like a 25% premium. So there's a couple of things you cannot miss, and you cannot miss lease expiration deadlines and time frames that you need to exercise options to renew or exercise options to negotiate a renewal.
Yeah. There's no free rent or build out allowance in the offer, but the rent is low.
Bad deal. No deal. There is a lease rate that landlords will typically not go below because when you lower the lease rate on a space or a property, it devalues the property.
Oh.
Investment properties sell or trade on a multiplier or multiple of rent. It's called a cap rate.
Oh.
And so people sometimes will see a space sit vacant for like, a period of time. They'll say, well, this has been vacant, so the landlord should be motivated to do an aggressive deal. No, because the second they do a lower lease rate than the property should have, it just devalued the property. And especially if you have multiple tenants there, a lot of landlords, if they got 10 tenants in a building, one space vacant, they'll sit on a vacancy for 2-3 years. And people are like, why are they doing this? It's because they don't want to devalue the property. If you take that last lease rate or the last deal and you lower the lease rate, and you want to go sell that property, whether you want to or maybe you're forced to, if you have to as a landlord for some reason, anyone who looks at it's going to say, well, the property is really worth this. Even though you have 9 leases higher, it's not worth that because you would not have done this 10th deal at that lease rate if it wasn't. And so, like, it's really interesting in the game of investment real estate. You do one bad deal, especially if it's recent. If it's one thing that's 4 or 5 years ago, you just slam someone in there to get a deal done. Like, you can maybe talk your way out of that scenario as a seller. But if you're doing investment real estate and you just made a deal at, let's say, $20 a foot and everyone else paying $25 a foot, anyone who looks at that's going to say that's not market or you wouldn't have done that deal. And so landlords have a lease rate that they won't go below typically, but they will give you TI and free rent and other concessions, even at that lowest lease rate. And that's a long answer, but a lot of people think, well, give me the best deal possible with no concessions. That does not exist. The best deal possible on a lease rate is still going to have concessions available because they're going to have money set aside for those other benefits, commissions, free rent, build out allowance. The lease rate might not come below a certain number, but if you don't capture the other benefits, even with that lower lease rate, you lost probably tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oof. All right. Last thing we do on the show, Colin, is called the parting shot. What's a bit of advice or a mantra that you would leave with clinicians who are listening, 28 minutes into this episode and saying, okay, there's a lot more than I need to know. What's something you want to just burn into their psyche?
Yeah, let an expert do the process for you, hold your hand for you. Like, you cooperate, you are the ultimate decision maker. It's very similar to healthcare. No one's going to strap you to a table and force you to do a procedure or do something or take medicine you don't want to take or do something you want to do. They're going to advise you, they're going to counsel you, they're going to give you the pros and cons. And at the end of the day, you're still fully in the driver's seat as the patient, but you've got someone helping you navigate the situation and trying to get you the best outcome possible. Same thing's true with tax strategy. There's significant tax laws that are on the table right now in Congress. There's things that changed last year. Like, you don't do your own taxes. Like, you have a really good expert CPA. And the same thing is true for legal. Like, you're not an attorney. You don't play games with contracts. You have a really good attorney. So it's really simple. Like, again, pick your sports analogy. You're going to have a pitcher, you're going to have a catcher, you're going to have a first baseman. Like, you're going to have different people on your team. They each have a unique skill set, but trying to make your catcher, your pitcher doesn't work very well. And trying to be the guy that does it all himself or herself is a really bad game plan.
Gonna get in trouble. All right, hire a professional. And we'll make sure they can reach it out in the show notes. But where should they go to get in touch with you if they're like, all right, this Colin guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about?
Yeah, our website is carr.us, so carr.us. We are a national firm. We're the actually only firm that's truly national that does healthcare tenant by rep. We're licensed in all 50 states. We're helping over 5,500 healthcare providers with their real estate right now as we speak. So we're not the only company that does this. We do believe that we do an excellent job, and we've been doing it for 16 and a half years now. So we got some time under our belt, but that's a great way to start. And I think that people getting representation, starting the process, reaching out to find an agent, having an initial conversation, you'll be glad that you didn't go it alone.
Colin Carr, appreciate you stopping by the show again, Colin. Thanks for dropping some insight on us.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me.
You ever wonder how those rock star clinicians seem to just know what to do? Like they've got a sixth sense in clinic. Well, here's the secret. Brooks IHL. Their residency and fellowship programs for PTs, OTs, and SLPs are where clinical skills meet elite mentorship. We're talking 150 hours of one-on-one mentoring, lab training that's immersive, and real-world experience inside Brooks Rehabilitation's top-tier system of care. And unlike some programs where you have to put your career on pause, Brooks IHL pays you a full salary while you level up. Their grads consistently outperform national board pass rates, and most of their mentors, they've been through the program themselves. If you're serious about being a clinical expert, this is the move. Go to brooksihl.org and check out all 10 program tracks. The next level of your career is waiting at Brooks.